In today's lesson, we're going to be working on solving equations one step and two steps with fractions. So your learning target today is I can solve one step and two step equations with fractions. And I'm just going to run through and remind you of a couple equation things that you should know. An equation is like a balanced scale, which we talked about when we did this with whole numbers and with integers. You start out with an equal sign in the middle, which means that each side is the same as the other. And in order for it to stay balanced, you must do the same thing to both sides. So if I add 5 to this side, then I have to add 5 to this side so that they balance back out. In math terms, we say we use inverse operations. In other words, you must undo whatever is happening to the variable by showing the same operation on both sides. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, square, or square root. So add and subtract are inverse, multiply and divide are inverse, and square root are inverse. So let's look at a couple examples in here at the beginning. Solving equations using the reciprocal. No common denominator needed. So when we have something like this, we have 5/6 times x equals 5/8. And when you guys see 5/6 times x, you say, oh, well, when we see multiplication, we divide. But you also know that when we divide by a fraction, we're really just multiplying by the reciprocal. And so you could show the division step, or you can just go straight to multiplying by a reciprocal, because you know that the 5 and 5 will cross-reduce to be 1 and 1, and the 6 and 6 will cross-reduce to be 1 and 1, and so you'll just have one x on this side equals, and then we're going to multiply this, do the same thing to the other side, so we're going to multiply by 6/5 on this side, and when I do that, the 5 and 5 cross-reduce to be 1 and 1. 6 and 8 can cross-reduce because 2 goes into both of them. 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. And so 1 times 3 is 3, and 4 times 1 is 4. So x equals 1/4. On this next one, we've got -7/10 times d equals 1 and 1/20. When we see a fraction next to a variable, we know it's showing multiplication, which the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So I could divide both sides by -7/10, or we know that dividing by a fraction is really the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So I recommend jumping straight to multiplying by the reciprocal here. And so I'm going to do that same thing to the other side, multiply by -10/7. The 10 and the 10 cross-reduce here, the 7 and the 7 cross-reduce here, and a negative times a negative is a positive d. On this side, before I can multiply 1 and 1/20 times -10/7, I'm going to have to change my mixed number to an improper fraction. So 1 times 20 is 20, plus 1 is 21/20, times -10/7. There's lots of cross-reducing that can happen here so that our answer is in simplest form. 7 and 21 both have a common factor of 7. 7 goes into 7 once and into 21 3 times. 10 and 20 have a common factor of 10. 10 goes into 10 once and into 20 twice. And so now I've got 3 times -1, which is -3, and 2 times 1, which is 2. And d equals -3/2. Now when we have an improper fraction, which means the top number is bigger than the bottom, we always want to convert it back to a mixed number. So we're going to say d equals -2 goes into 3 one time with 1 left over. So I've got -1 1/2.